What do some writers get wrong with flashbacks and some are good at?
That's an excellent question. That is something that many writers struggle with, the flashback sequence. And you have to recognize when you have a flashback, you are interrupting the flow of story. So if you're going to interrupt the momentum in the present moment, it has to be something that is advancing the plot in the present by going to the past. And many writers will make the mistake of not understanding that for the first thing, and then they'll have flashbacks where there's not an arc of the flashback. And when you have flashbacks, you need to go through the thinking of, how is this advancing my plot? This is going to take the audience out of story. So is it paralleling the arc in a way that there's a value in going to the past as a way to better understand and add depth to the present so the character can get to the future?
If I remember correctly, I know we were talking about Emily the criminal off camera.
Yes.
We don't really see flashbacks of what her initial dilemma was.
Right.
And I think that makes it so interesting. It really keeps you hooked.
It does. Like the interesting thing is, there are many writers who will say, why do you have to have a wound? Do you have to have a wound? Do you have to go into the past? How come the present arc can't carry that weight? And the answer to that is the present arc, if it is a compelling enough dilemma and we feel it in the framework of the setup, can carry a lot of that. The value of understanding through not going to flashback, and like in a character, like you mentioned, through not going to the flashback, but putting the weight in the present arc, but maybe through dialogue and character dynamic in the present, we are feeling the void of the past through choice, through action, without having to go there or to know anything specific, because we are seeing it. And writers have perfected, I have seen writers, certainly when you look at the genre of the action film, you are often looking at, you're not going to go into the, but I even think the action film has evolved in a way to where we do feel the earlier wound, and there are different methods that we're able to thread together the emotional arc in the same way. So I think that show does a brilliant job of setting up a strong enough dilemma in the present where we feel something from the past without having to flashback.
Right, because if I remember correctly, her dilemma, which we weren't sure if we were going to see the flashback, is brought up a few times and it's hinted at or
Yes.
It's directly talked about, but we never, it really is this thing that keeps you hooked.
Yes.
And, the opening scene, if I remember correctly, was the job interview, and I
Yes.
thought that was just so brilliant how it was played out.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think it can work. Where
It
you don't.
can work, and I think also, like, you tapped into something, the idea of the puzzle of story. What are you creating that is creating anticipation, that the audience is playing a mind game through what you're revealing in the present that makes you curious about the past? When you look at a show like The Flight Attendant, and you start with a flashback, you start with the flaw. We see the very flawed behavior with her promiscuity and her partying and her drinking in the beginning. So you start with the flaw. The flaw is the story of the wound, so that creates anticipation. Then we get a hint of a flashback about her with her father, and the idea of a deer, I think, is the first flashback. And then by the climax, we learn that she lost her father, but that's not giving us the whole thing. That's giving us two pieces of the puzzle, which is creating a curiosity, which is creating anticipation for the series arc, which we're going to get the full story of what happened to Emily's father. How does that connect with her flawed behavior that we see from the start? And how does the pursuit allow her an opportunity to heal?
So do you think flashbacks are effective when they're hinted at?
I do, and I also encourage writers to think about how can you use your background and the character action and choice to tell a story without having to go to the flashback. So, for example, something that was so brilliant with the split was, and I missed it the first time I saw the first episode, was when you opened, you saw Hannah and her husband were at opposite ends of the bed, and you felt the void in the middle. And then you cut to a series of pictures of Hannah and her sisters and her mom. And then there's a picture where you can see that the father was cut out. And that was a hint, without us knowing yet what specifically happened. We're like, huh, what was that? So I think that when you quietly give us information from the past in the present, there's a tremendous value if you do it in a way artistically that creates a curiosity and an anticipation from the audience.
So yeah, don't be too overt with the flashbacks.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I believe that there is a value to flashbacks. You're going to have many development executives who will say, don't flashback, don't do voiceovers, that's lazy writing. I hear it over and over and over again from writers who tell me that they're hearing these instructions, and then you watch the Golden Globes, you watch the Emmys, you watch the Oscars, and stories that have flashbacks are the stories that are hitting in the deepest way. The message is, don't gratuitously take us to the past. Only take us to the past if there's value in the present story.
Yeah, so any type of, especially like with an orphan story, like with, forgive me, I'm blanking on the name, with Dev Patel and Nicole Kidman.
Yes.
Lion? Yes.
Lion. Yes.
That one, a very effective
Yes.
flashback, because you needed to know.
That was like a double narrative. That was very effective in the recognition. If I remember correctly, I think that, or no, it was linear, but we were in the past before, but that inciting incident was so powerful with what happened that changed the trajectory of the boy's life.
Sure, and in Queen's Gambit as well, another
Yes.
orphan story, we needed to know certain things about how the mom felt and her sort of worldview.
Queen's Gambit is brilliant. The Queen's Gambit, I was so emotionally connected to that story, and what they utilized that was so valuable is we were in the heat of the wound when it happened, and we felt it, and we we're like, you're in. When you feel the wound in the heat of the moment that it happens, and then you have the puzzle of what didn't I know that transpired before and after that moment that is going to affect the present plot, and you bring us to those gaps, then we're in. And there's a value in that. There was a show with Maggie Gyllenhaal called An Honorable Woman, if I remember correctly, where it starts in, and it's not, when you start in the wound, it's not considered a flashback. If you start in the childhood wound and then you cut to 25 years later, then you give us that piece that we need without having to go to a flashback. You're in real time when the wound happens. Then there was a transition. So in An Honorable Woman, we see a little girl, a little boy, their father, they sit down to this formal dinner at this shishi place, and the waiter suddenly stabs the father. And we see the blood go on the little girl. And then we cut to Maggie Gyllenhaal in her 20s in the same place that she was when her father was killed. And the parallel of what led to her father's life and a choice that she was making in the series setup was linked. So by literally giving us that page and a half, 2 pages, you make it, we're in. Like, you're like, I want to be a part of this character's pursuit. I want to know, how does a character move beyond a trauma like that without having to, and then it did go into a double narrative where you understood a different point in time and how it paralleled what was going on with the present plot. And there was tremendous value because of the multi-dimensions.